Hello and welcome to MLW Confusion. I'm your host Rob Kemmer, bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. Now, we're going to start the potty off, it's not really news by this point, because, they announced it nearly a week ago, and, let's face it, the show would have been tonight, but MLW Slaughterhouse has been canceled due to Hurricane Helene, it ran rampant. I don't begrudge this decision at all. The safety of the fans, safety of the workers is paramount to everything, and thoughts and prayers, speedy recovery to all that's been affected by the hurricane. That being said, we are going to have to move along because we still have a show tonight. So we're not going to talk about Slaughterhouse, sadly enough, but luckily I got a backup plan, a freaking sweet backup plan. I might add, got Joe Dombrowski, the voice of MLW and many other promotions throughout let's face it, North America, coming on the show. We are going to talk for a bit about a myriad of topics, primarily commentary and the wrestling library. And I'm not going to lie to you, I needed at least 3 hours to talk to this man. However, being respectful of his time, I lowered it down to a minute 6, I think, is the recording runtime out of it. But there was just so much stuff we could talk about. And, to pull back the curtain a little bit, I've not ever really had the opportunity, especially on this show, to sit down and talk with someone who does commentary and does commentary as their primary gig. Obviously, I've had bunches and bunches of wrestlers, and, most of them have done, a guest shot at commentary or whatnot, but I've never had someone, that's their job to do commentary. And so I hopefully took advantage of this opportunity to just ask things, to talk about, the psychology of the gig and, how it works working with various booth sizes and partners of varying personality. So I hope you enjoy this. As I said, it's not going to be, I needed so much more time than what I was allowed, but I think I'm really psyched for this interview and how it turned out. But yeah, I won't gush about that any further. So that's going to come up here in a bit. But first, of course, we got some news, at least some more names coming out of Lucha Apocalypto. That is going to be the next announced MLW show. As far as I know, we're not doing anything in October. So November 9th, I believe, is, yes, in Cicero Stadium. Lucha Apocalypto is going to be the next MLW show. And we got a handful of names announced for this show, as I've repeated it as nauseam. So, these names include former MLW Tag Team Champion Okamura, Magnus, a perennial rival of Mystico. He's been announced too. Ultimo Guerrero has been announced. No word whether he's going to be challenging for the MLW Heavyweight Championship at this event or not. He did lay down the challenge for Slaughterhouse. Atlantis Jr. is making his return to MLW, and new debut coming in the form of excuse me, I'm going to butcher this one too, Esfinge, I believe it's pronounced. I've not done my research on it. I'm just going by the press release here. But one of the young up-and-comers, and by this I mean, of course, he's been wrestling for, at least a decade now, but he's had his run-ins with Volador Jr., and evidently he has an ongoing rivalry with Hechicero as well. So the Golden Sphinx, if you will, is coming to MLW from CMLL. These are all the latest names for Lucha Apocalypto, Cicero Stadium, November 9th. And of course, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about Kings of Colosseum. Tickets are now on sale for the MLW's return to Dallas this here January 11th, 2025 to be exact. So be sure to get your tickets if you're in the area. MLW puts on a great show despite how much I complain about things. It is a blast live, so be sure to check that out. And of course, it'll be available on the YouTubes for everyone of us that don't live near Texas. So that being said, we passed that by quickly. Stay tuned. We are going to be back with Joe Dombrowski swinging in by. In the meanwhile, though, let's get ourselves an energy drink. maybe order, a new coffee station, order some new coffee. I don't know, but we're coming back with Joe Dombrowski. If you're like me, sometimes you need a pick-me-up to get you through the day. I drink Ray's Energy for that pickup. Ray's comes in a bunch of different flavors, and more recently Italian Ice, which is great, by the way. And it contains no sugar, so there's no crash after you drink it. And really, best of all, if you go through me and go to repsports.com, use my code CASS, you get 15% off your order. So, also, be like Cass, drink Ray's Energy. We are back. As I said at the top of the show here at MLW Confusion, we have a special edition. We are sitting down with Joe Dombrowski, the voice of MLW, and, well, let's face it, companies all across North America at this point. So, Joe, how are you doing this afternoon?
You know what? I'm doing great. I appreciate the invite. I appreciate this platform. Um, as always, there's never a dull day here in my office, never a dull week. There's always a large to do list to get done, projects, opportunities, contacts, and it just keeps on going. But always have time to talk to somebody like you, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you again for coming on. And I mean, we'll cover all this, but you kind of have your fingers in a little bit of everything in the realm of professional wrestling. But of course, I always like to start with the most interesting question that no other podcaster ever asks anyone. Where did your love of professional wrestling start?
I have absolutely no idea. My earliest memory of wrestling is um, I don't know if it's weird to say I was maybe channel surfing when I was 5 years old. I don't know. I just remember stumbling across it on TV. And the earliest cognizant memory that I have is an interview with Andre the Giant and Bobby Heenan. And I don't know if that's the first thing I saw, but it's the first thing I can remember seeing. And it's Andre. I know it's after WrestleMania 6 because Andre is crushing Bobby's hand or stepping on his hand or something like that. And I think just the noise, the colors, the energy, just the rapid fire pace of the show, I'm assuming that's what hooked me. Because in my memory, I blink and then I have the action figures and the VHS tapes and the lunch boxes and all that stuff. So um, I don't know if I found wrestling so much as wrestling found me, and to say the least, it has completely transfixed and transformed my life in every single way since then. It's alarming and jarring to think about who or where I would be right now if I didn't have that chance encounter with it, 30 plus years ago.
And since we're going with the Andre Bobby Heenan grouping, were you a WWF child, or did you kind of just take whatever was on the TV screen at the moment?
I mean, I was predominantly a WWF kid. Obviously, at that point, it was the most polished, kid oriented product. I mean, I think any kid, if you see um, Big Boss Man and Akeem the African Dream on one channel, and then you see just Tom Zank and plain white trunks on the other channel, you're going to gravitate towards the colors and the characters and just the larger than life aspects. I watched WCW sparingly. I had some of the tapes. I had all the action figures. I knew of it. I liked it. I don't know that I loved it at the time. Um, and just that obsessive nature uh, really helped me branch out to learn about other things in wrestling. Um, Obviously, pre-internet, obviously pre everything at your fingertips. So it wasn't a case of I ever felt fed. I was always looking for more. I was always looking for next. And I found Kit Parker Films put out VHS tapes that were 30 minutes long that were called the World's Greatest Wrestling Series, The Missing Matches. And I absolutely did an homage to that when I did my Missing Matches series on DVD a few years ago. But it was Randy Savage, The Missing Matches, Hulk Hogan, King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant. And that's how I learned, even though I didn't know what they were yet, I was learning about the territories. And I was watching Memphis and Mid-South and San Antonio and all these different areas. And I was, probably the only 5-year-old kid in Pittsburgh who was a fan of Lance Russell. But here I was. And it just had such a stark contrast to the bright lights and the sanitization. Now I'm watching this dark, dimly lit building, and it just feels different. It just feels dangerous. It just feels like something that maybe I shouldn't be watching. And the Sheik is throwing fire in people's faces and stabbing people with a pencil, and like, okay, there's a whole different side to this. I want to learn more. And that's still snowballing to this day. And I still have a passion for finding things that I didn't know existed or I've never seen. It's a lot harder to do now, but you got to dig harder in those nooks and crannies. But I've just always been that sponge to want to know and see as much about our business as possible.
I honestly, I don't have my fingers in everything like you do, but I feel the same way. Is just this the thing I love about professional wrestling in this day and age with the advent of the internet. Like there is so much out there, either whether we're talking the current product or people who have taped things on VHS and threw it up on YouTube and Vimeo, and even by proxy, your pro wrestling library, which uh, like even before I was familiar with your work, really like found on the High Spots Wrestling Network as a whole, sub channel on that, and it's just as a WWF child myself, like when I got to see some of the other stuff, it was just I know I felt wrestling for other and like what we would now call the territories was a lot more real per se. Like I understood like WWF was kind of a cartoon ish. I mean, yes, there was moments that absolutely terrified me. Still traumatized by Jake the Snake and Randy Savage that moment. But like, you weren't necessarily. I missed out on Randy Savage pile driving Ricky Morton through a table in like an empty arena and that sort of thing. You've already kind of like got your hands, even at a young age, got your hands at a little bit of everything. What was the kind of like the final push that got you into like actually being a talent in the realm of professional wrestling?
I mean, I always knew I wanted to do it. I just didn't know the how, the why, the when. Um, I knew I wasn't going to be an in-ring talent to the extent of at least a professional wrestler. Don't get me wrong. Everybody has that thought and has that dream at one point in their life that gets into this. I feel like, but I was never an athletically gifted kid. I was never. I don't know. I would never say I had a particularly high pain threshold. I think if I had gifts at any point when I was young, they were more um, mental because I'm a chronic overthinker. I'm always inside my own head, which, um, if you're thinking negative thoughts and intrusive thoughts, can be a very debilitating thing. But if you're excited about something and you have a project and you're just constantly spinning your wheels and well, what if this works or what if we did it this way, it can actually help you a lot just creatively as far as just trial and error. Because even when I'm going through humdrum everyday life, my brain is just spinning and conceptualizing. Um, but so I thought I had a mental gift, and I thought I had a verbal gift. I was a very shy, insulated, socially awkward late bloomer. But when I had a chance to come out of my shell, I could um, maybe overcompensate, maybe make up for lost time. I mean, I was very good at performing in those certain realms where I felt like, okay, it's okay, you can spread your wings a little bit. So I didn't really know what independent wrestling was. I'd gone to one local show when I was in second grade, which was at my what would be my future high school. And then I didn't really know about it at all until the late 90s boom of wrestling popularity when every single wrestling company, had a TV deal. And it's how I got turned on to, Pro Wrestling Express, Steel City Wrestling, all the Pittsburgh groups. And that was the epiphany like, oh, they're doing things, 30, 45 minutes from my house. Like, and I'm 12 years old watching this. Okay, this will be my way in. And the boom kind of subsided. And then those companies left TV and 2002, I went to my first IWC International Wrestling Cartel event as a fan. The main event that drew me in was Jerry the King Lawler versus Kamala. Why that? Because in one of the Kit Parker VHS tapes I bought as a 5-year-old, there's a Jerry Lawler Kamala match from Memphis. So that already had a special place in my heart. Plus, you're watching Lawler every week on Raw. Plus, I'm watching Kamala since I'm a kid. So like that, just to be second row and have that right in my face was crazy. Being at that show and seeing those guys and seeing, my first time seeing Colt Cabana, my first time seeing M. Dog Matt Cross, my first time seeing in person Christian York and Joey Matthews and Balls Mahoney and Guido Maritato, all these guys, and the local talent that I had watched on TV years ago and lost track with, Shirley Doe and Dennis Gregory and, Norm Connors, the promoter who used to manage as Notorious Norm. Like it really, really bit me at that point. And it's like, all right, I need to find a way in this specifically to do this. And it took me 4 months to figure it out. 4 months after that, I am middle manning a fundraiser for my Spanish class at my high school. And there's a whole other rabbit hole to go down as far as how much that Spanish class has helped me, if you realize some of the things I do now. But that got my foot in the door to do work with IWC. I did color commentary that first night, which, by the way, at my high school, same school I saw the independent show at when I was in second grade, the promoter, Norm Connors, is the one that broke me in. That show 9 years earlier in that same building was his first show as a manager. So you've got really weird, like full circle universe is vibing kind of thing here. But that I was awful the first night because I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know the feel of it, but I gave it everything I had, and that opened the door to write for the website, that opened the door to eventually work my way up to doing full-time commentary. It took another 7 months to kind of beg and bother for more opportunities and tryouts and kind of get a lay of the land, and timing helped too because I had to fill in for somebody at one point. So that was my path in. And I knew to many extents I wasn't ready because I had just turned 17, had a lot of growing up to do. I still wasn't that social butterfly. I still had a lot of just hang-ups and baggage, but I also knew like this is where you belong. This is where you need to be. And you need to make this happen now, because if you don't, who knows if this door is ever going to open again. And here we are today.
So you got started like exceedingly young. I mean, in which I feel like we hear about wrestlers training at say like 14, 16. You don't hear it too much about like referees and commentary starting that young unless they're already kind of have their foot in the door via relations. Like so being that young and being in the booth, did you have any sort of pushback, or was there anything like I don't know, see like in retrospect would seem extra weird just because of your age, or did you just kind of I don't want to say fit right in necessarily.
I mean, I definitely didn't fit right in because I didn't. My thing was I was very intimidated, and I had such a lack of self confidence that I would look around and think, what am I doing here? Do I belong? I want to be here, but do I belong here? Am I earning my keep? Because again, a lot of these guys I'm sharing a locker room with now. I first saw on television in a block of programming where it was ECW, it was WWF Shotgun Saturday Night, and then it was the local wrestling show. So to me, at 12 years old at the time, like they're all stars, they're all larger than life. I'm in awe of all of them because they're pro wrestlers. And now I'm sharing a locker room with them, with AJ Styles, who happens to be my favorite wrestler, watching every week on the Wednesday night TNA pay-per-views, and Shark Boy and Christopher Daniels, and a young kid just starting to get a buzz around himself named CM Punk. All these guys coming through, Shane Douglas from the area, he came in from time to time. it was very overwhelming for me, and it took me a couple of 3 years to really start to feel comfortable, just because I was in my own head so much. Um, it got to a point I felt comfortable enough on the air, but even then, I knew there would be it would take time to kind of earn my stripes and prove myself, because I wasn't at the training school taking the bumps, and I wasn't doing the traditional, paying of dues to get in. Um, I instead of falling down 100 times, maybe I'm online typing an article or an interview or a result page or whatever. I mean, it was just there really wasn't a parallel that I knew of, which put me in my own head even more. You know, but as time went on, um, I got progressively better, or at least less worse at everything I did, and I was never complacent. I was never just satisfied just to be along for the ride. It was okay. I need to watch this back. How can I be better? How can I do this differently? What did I say that sounded wrong? What did I say that you wouldn't hear on a Monday night TV show? Whatever the case was, and combination of work ethic and stubbornness, I think eventually anybody that doubted me, came around to realize that, I was doing my best to contribute my own way.
Well, and obviously it's it worked out. It paid off. You're correct because you're all over the place now, and like I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. Like this interview's like overall been like a couple months coming, just because you've been all over the place. Your schedule's been so busy, and I mean and in the meanwhile, you're on Major League Wrestling. You've done Ring of Honor. You're a regular feature on AAA. Like these are big names in professional wrestling currently. What how do I want to phrase this? So looking back in the last 15 years or so, like what how has commentary changed for you in terms of kind of like how you get yourself into it, or just even say like the psychology of it within the business?
Um, I always say that you never stop learning. It's a constant evolution. And obviously, commentary in general has just changed because, technology has changed, television has changed. Just the relationship between on air talent and production staff has changed and become more involved. And obviously, you don't need to be within the business to know there's just a lot more components to it than there were back in the day. You're not just sitting there and calling a match, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of moving parts, especially when you're live or when you're doing a high end television production. You need to know where you are, where you're going, what's next, where's the video package, who's being interviewed, where's the graphic that pops up, do you need to talk over it, is there a music bed, is there audio to it already, um, you know that many moving parts at once keeps you on your feet, keeps you on your toes, um, and that's altogether different than doing an independent show, where an independent show was entirely me against myself. It was, how can I be better than I was last month? Or how can I work with my partner better? Or how can I enhance what I'm watching in the ring better? With a company like an MLW, like a AAA, like a couple other places I've been, um, it really forces you to be at your best and to have that laser focus. And just there's a layer upon a layer upon a layer of what started as just, well, I want to call the matches, and now it's I'm part narrator and part analyst and part pitchman and part air traffic controller and part 6 or 8 other things. But again, it's that evolution, it's that next challenge, that next rung of the ladder. So I embrace that. I appreciate that. And what I'm doing now is going to help me for whatever's coming next in 3 years that I'm not even thinking about yet. So it's just always been a constant form of, how can I get the most out of what I'm doing with the least amount of effort, least amount of words, least amount of, anything, how can I get to the audience the most directly? And I would say at any given time in my run, um, you could play me back a match I called 5 years beforehand, and I'd cringe at it because it's just I don't think that way anymore. I don't work that way anymore. At the time, I thought it was great. It's the best I ever sounded. It probably was, but um, it's not enough because everything is always changing and evolving. You can always get better, and I guarantee whatever match I called last week, I'm happy with now. I'm not thinking about it now, but I'll watch it in 5 years. And I'm like, oh, what did you do on that show? Just how it is, circle of life.
And as you said, there's so many kind of moving parts going along with everything now, and with the advent of technology, and even like how you record is entirely different. And I mean, we've already, like a lot of the tape shows, well, obviously were taped, and commentary was dubbed later, and you can see that a bit more and more as time goes on as well. But how different is it to do like a tape show kind of cold than it is to do something live?
Extremely. I had to teach myself on the fly because the very first time I ever did that was with Ring of Honor. Biggest opportunity in my career, and I'm in basically an empty room in the Ring of Honor offices with Dave Prazak to my right, um, Shane Hagedorn behind us answering phones, and we had Eric, the editor, with us. And right outside that room was the ring that everybody trained and worked out in. Um, so, historic building in Bristol, Pennsylvania. But it was jarring for me because so much of what I love about the business and so much of what I thrive on is playing off of that emotion, right? If you don't have emotion, one way or another, you're not doing your job right. You got to feel strongly and passionately one way or the other about somebody, um, or else it's not working. So to be in an empty room a couple of weeks later and having to get my voice to that level, get my energy to that level, took time and it took reps. And again, it took listening to it back and, oh God, the music's drowning me out. Or, oh God, the crowd came up here and my voice didn't change at all. Um, Things like that I went back and looked at and like, all right, I need to really put myself in that building and get that ebb and flow right and get that cadence and that pacing right. It is a very, very tough art to master. Um, to this day, there's still things I'll look at and, present day and think like, I could have been up a little more for that. Or, I wasn't there, so I didn't hear that talent talking in their match so I could lay out for just little nitpicky things like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, the most difficult thing is creating emotion when there's just none around you. And you really, really need to put yourself there. And it takes a lot of focus and just mental strength and ingenuity and, passion for what you do. Because even if nothing else going on where you are is exciting to you, you still need to act like this is, the biggest thing you've ever seen. So took a while, but I've had the luxury of doing so many things, just from home, from this room. Um, AAA, so much of what I do there has been remotely. And when I broke in, it never even crossed my mind that one day I could work for a uh, company in Mexico or a company in Japan or any place like that because they just didn't have, that I knew of, English announce teams because they didn't have any kind of a television or video presence in the US. And obviously, the world's a lot smaller now than it was 21 years ago. And you need to be prepared to break into those new markets, and it's helped open some incredible doors. And I'm very thankful that I was able to go through all of those reps to be ready for present day, because it is not easy being on the English side of Hugo Savinovich, the most exciting, energetic individual ever. I'm not sure he's human, but the way he just goes. And if Hugo tells you you need to be energetic and enthusiastic, I mean, me at a 10 is like Hugo at a 6. So you got to work to climb uphill for that one.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that. So obviously, a lot of commentary and play-by-play is done with the team. What's it like, kind of like working with those different personalities, like right there in the booth? Like if you're sitting there with like a Hugo, like how like what goes through like your mind is like you're trying to like either match him or be a counterbalance, or like on the flip side, if you have someone who's a bit more subdued, or like if we're just gonna go, I don't know, like just a name drop, like I don't know, old timey time, say like a Gordon Soley who was a bit more level headed, subdued. Like how do you go about balancing that sort of relationship?
I think my thought process was always, figure out what my partner does best and find a way to accentuate that and find a way to fill whatever void there might be in a way they're not. And I think the best example I can think of is when I started with MLW. I wound up, with Rich Bocchini, who I had worked with one day before, and it was after WrestleMania. It was about 1 a.m, and we only did like 2 or 3 matches together, so probably not the best environment to really zone in and get our reps in professionally. But Rich was very much, and still is very much, like a sportscaster. And, in every respect, he excels at that. And the fact that Rich is not calling professional hockey right now, let alone professional wrestling, on the highest of levels, baffles me, because I know he has such a passion for hockey, and I know that he would enhance any of those games because he's informative, he's entertaining, he knows his stuff. But Rich brought that very straightforward, informational approach. So I didn't want us to be the same voices. I didn't want us to just sound identical. So I wanted to come in louder. I wanted to come in more hyperbolic. I wanted to come in more wrestling, right? And maybe Rich is going to sit here and tell you that, well, statistically, there's an 80% chance that when so and so hits this finishing move, they're going to win. And then I'll come in and say, oh, that's the most devastating thing you've ever seen, or whatever I said. But I wanted to tell that same story, but just with a different flavoring on it. And, I never try to out the other person, because that doesn't do either of us any favors. Um, I love working with an antagonist because they can give you a counterpoint, and you can kind of have an informal debate around what's happening. I love working with somebody that's a big personality. But at the same time, if they're not, then maybe you need to feed them a few more questions, or maybe you need to, make sure that they pick their spots a little more carefully. Obviously, if it was somebody like Gordon Soley, he could do that in his sleep. But if it was somebody who maybe was a little lesser experienced, okay, well, what is their area of expertise? What can they bring to this? Better than I can. And in a lot of cases, if it's somebody with little experience, it's an ex-wrestler or a current wrestler who's maybe not booked or maybe injured or whatever the case is. And I have the advantage then to be able to say, okay, tell me why this hold hurts. Okay, you've been in the ring with this guy. What would you do in this situation? And really play to those strengths. And if we can do that and bring the best out of each other, then I know we're bringing out the best of the match.
And how does this dynamic change when you start doing a three-man booth? I know a lot like a three-man booth is starting to become a little bit in vogue. We'll say in the larger companies, aka WWE, AEW, but we also see that when well, like more recently using MLW for example, Brett Ryan Goslin has joined you on commentary a handful of times. But like, how does like having that third person change up things as well?
Goslin has joined us, but he's never been invited. I'd like to put that out
Well, no
there.
one invites Goslin. Let's be real.
No, no, what? Unless it's to an Ellen DeGeneres lookalike contest. But be that as it may, I'll thank Alex Kane for that. Three-man booths are hard. I don't mind them when it is someone, you know, in a guest capacity. For example, a Goslin or a Bobby Fish or an Alex Kane, or even to an extent a Saint Laurent, um, because that there's a journalistic task there. There's information to be attained there. There's questions on the mind that we need to get the take of the guest on, whether it's in relation to the match or the match upcoming at the next big event, whatever the case is. Um, so I enjoy that, and I like that as a challenge. The issue with a lot of consistent three-man announcer booths is that for it to work, everyone needs to have a very distinct, separate style. Um, I thought, Vince and JR and Lawler were a great quintessential example of a three-man booth that can work because Vince brought the enthusiasm and JR brought the facts and the analytics and Lawler brought the humor. Um, AEW is doing a tremendous job with it now because you have Tony as the seasoned veteran and you have Excalibur as kind of the modern day, I guess in a sense, Mike Tenay is the fact guy, and Taz. Not only can he be a more of a character and do more comedy if it entails, or attitude if it entails, if it's somebody who's opposing Hook, whatever the case is, but he's also the fight analyst and he can call all of Hook's judo throws, and he can call the submission holds and tell you why they hurt. Um, my first ever three-man booth was very, very early in my career. It was Jeff Gorman, who was the lead guy, and it was Anthony Kingdom James, who was the analyst and kind of the villain. And I tried to be that Mike Tenay because I'm not going to outlead the lead, and I'm not going to out heel the heel. So where do I fit in? All right, I can give you stats, I can give you figures, I can give you history. Um, if you can do that and everybody kind of knows and understands their role, then you can minimize people talking over each other or people tripping on each other. Um, but that's tough. And again, that comes back to being able to be malleable and be flexible based on who you're working with and what the circumstances. That's not always easy. Um, you know, whether it's me or whether it's somebody that's a lot less experienced, like that's you have to find that comfort zone, find that groove. Um, so I wouldn't recommend doing them for the sake of doing them, but if you've got the right people and the right mindset and the right chemistry, they can absolutely work.
Right. And like the examples you brought up uh, are great examples. I do think the three-man booth with King, JR, and Vince is surprisingly underrated. And you just kind of forget that there was a three-man booth like for that, especially leading right up into the Attitude Era. But I want to flip the question then. So we've talked three-man booth. What like how does things change if you're flying solo?
If you're flying solo, you need to just naturally let things breathe a little more, which I think a lot of announcers could serve to do in general, myself included. But sometimes things are just so quick moving that that gets kind of lost in the shuffle. Um, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to force feed yourself on anybody, um, and you got to pace yourself because if you're out there alone for whatever it is, 3-4 hours sometimes. Um, you're not going to have an extended break. You're not going to, you can't lose your voice. Um, Not my favorite thing, but I don't mind it if I have a familiarity with everybody. Um, Sometimes I'll get a voice gig and it'll be my first time working with everybody, and quite obviously I'm alone, so that's hard because there's gaps there that you don't know how to fill because maybe you understand 20% of somebody's story. You understand where we are here and now. Maybe you have a bio sheet, hopefully, but you weren't there to follow how we got here. You weren't there to really get inside the heads of the talent, and that can be hard. Um, but I think if it's a roster that I'm very familiar with, it just gives me a chance to pace it a little better, pace it a little smarter, um, pick my timing a little more, and just be cognizant of, you know, don't blow your wad too soon, don't overextend yourself, like be smart with it. One of the things that I really struggled with, and this again is an issue with the 3-man booth. When I started, um, I spoke entirely too quickly, and it's ironic. You always hear a young wrestler get told, "Slow down, slow down." Well, no one was telling me to slow down. I had to tell myself to slow down. When you're solo, that's really not a thing. You learn to slow down because if you don't, you're going to run out of stuff to say. Um, but yeah, I mean, Joey Styles is one of the guys I watched growing up, obviously. So I could channel a little bit from him, and he gets a lot of love, but strangely, probably not enough love. For what he was able to do to do so many live broadcasts and just however many hundreds of hours of TV, pretty much alone. Um, but again, it's just rolling with the punches, and no matter how many people I'm with, the mission stays the same. It just comes down to adapting to the elements and giving it all you got.
We're going to go ahead and kind of quasi wind up, kind of we'll say the commentary part of it, because I do want to talk about the wrestling library, but just kind of put you on the spot. Like, who are some of your favorite people to work with in the booth?
Steve Carino in Ring of Honor was great. Um, I learned a lot from Kevin Kelly. Um, on an independent level, Aaron McGuire and Benjamin C. Steele are great foils. Um, Aaron was a lot like my Bobby Heenan, and BC Steele is a lot like my Paul E. Dangerously in terms of just the style they brought to how we did this. And again, you roll with it because sometimes you're calling Ring of Honor at the Manhattan Center, and sometimes you're calling the Rock and Roll Express in a tiny town in North Carolina. But either way, you got to have the right style and the right basis for it. But yeah, those handful there were the best of both. And I love working with anybody who challenges me to be better. And that's anybody who's done this on a high level, whether it was Rich Bocchini or Matt Stryker, um, Kevin Kelly, Al Snow, Jim Cornette, Mark Madden. Um, even if Jack Corpella, I mean, even if they're guys I consider friends, like Kevin and Madden and Corpella and guys like that, it it allows me to put extra pressure on myself. Like, okay, these guys have been all these places. Can I hang with them? Can I work with them? Can I play off of them? And I love those challenges and being able to make that work. And I'm sure I'm forgetting others, and I'll apologize for leaving them out. But I mean, Tyler Voles does incredible work out in Chicago for AAW. And God, I got to throw in Les Thatcher because Les and I did the commentary for the Wrestling from the Heartland series and the new commentary for the Pillman Memorial Show. And I got to throw in Shane Douglas because I did a work for it with him and Scott Demore's Border City. We did Hardcore Legacy together, another one of my projects. Guys like that. And the last names I'll give you were probably the two most surreal names I had a chance to work with, especially with the backdrop we had. And that's Tony Schiavone and David Crockett at Ric Flair's last match doing, basically in front of the old JCP set recreation. That was just a surreal, insane day all around. But every announcer I've worked with has made me better in some form or fashion, so I appreciate them all.
That is quite a list. I should have just like warned you beforehand. You just wrote everything out, but unfortunately, as I told you in our little warm up, like my most professional thing about me is probably my first email I send out to any talent. But
hey, if I can't improv after 21 years of doing this, then that's on me.
There you go. But kind of moving in a different direction because I want to cover this, and we've been talking for quite some time to begin with. But you, in addition to commentary, your other kind of put under one umbrella, your other big project is your wrestling library. Like, how did that come about? Like, how did that even like start? Where you went like, hey, I can collect all these, get all this footage from anywhere, everywhere, across all time, and be able to kind of just put it in one spot and go.
I made a promise to myself when I was young in the business that I would never invest my own money in anything. And that's probably the promise in my life I've broken the most in wrestling. Um, Started very innocently. I was booking, hosting, and executive producing PWO Prime Wrestling TV in Cleveland, Ohio, from 2007 to 2013, and just with the basic organic evolution of the business and how things worked, as time went on, I wound up having to take on more and more responsibilities because either people left or people couldn't hit a deadline, or I just happened to be the most equipped. And when I took over the production and distribution and shipping of the DVDs in whatever it was, year 4 or 5, I got a disc duplicator. I got a disc printer. I started actually making these products outside, from my own home, doing it in house, of all the DVDs of the shows and the pay per views that we did, and that kind of got me in the groove of doing it, and like having and managing an inventory and balancing the books and reporting back to sales and just all of the nuts and bolts of running a media division. When, hey, I'm just trying to help fund the next show. I don't know I'm learning all this. I'm just doing it. And then at one point, I always had this idea in the back of my head, and it was very intriguing to me. And I'm not going to call myself a conspiracy theorist because I think that term has got a lot darker of a tone in recent years. But I'm someone that asks questions, you know, and I've always been intrigued by conspiracy theories. Not to say I believe all of them, but I think some of them have merit. But whether it's how did the pyramids get built, or whether it was what happened when JFK was assassinated, or whatever the case is, and it always really intrigued me that there were conspiracy theories in wrestling. And with everything everybody knows or claims to know, there's still some uncharted territory out there. And the thing that always got me the most was the fact there were people in wrestling that believe that the Montreal Screwjob was pre-planned and that Brett and Vince were in on it. And I had heard Jerry Lawler say things like this in interviews. I'd heard Kevin Nash say things like this in interviews. Steve Carino said it to my face one time. Like, it was so intriguing to me because as a fan, one of my favorite things to watch is Brett versus Shawn. Not just the matches, but just the whole rivalry and just the back and forth, the stick work, everything, because it felt so authentic. Because so much of it was it's great television. Um, so to go back to that and think like, oh, there might be another, way of looking at this. And I thought, man, somebody should do a documentary about that. Wait a minute, I could do a documentary about that. And I kind of put on my inner Jesse Ventura hat. I'm like, hey, Steve, I got an idea. And I just started conceptualizing, and we released what was called the Montreal Theory WrestleMania Weekend 2013. And I had invested over $2,000 of my own money to get this made. I didn't know if one person would care, but it wound up being a massive success, and really um, accentuated my passion for not just telling other people's stories in wrestling, and not just telling my in-ring stories in wrestling, but also telling stories outside of the realm of a wrestling show. And we did refereeing one-on-one with Jimmy Corderas, the first referee seminar in the United States. We did Legend of Virgil. We did Finding Zach Gowen, the documentary of the first one-legged pro wrestler ever. All these ideas that I felt passionately about. Like, more people need to see this. More people need to learn about this. There's something tangible here. There's something valuable here. It grew into, like, once or twice a year, I would put out something original, something different. As far as digging into old content and finding something that maybe wasn't previously available, a lot of that goes back to Les Thatcher. And the fact that one day in about 2016 or so, Les let me clean out his garage. And I took an entire box of VHS tapes that really had never, ever seen the light of day. Maybe if you were in the HWA crowd and bought a VHS off the merch table, but no wide release, no nothing. And he had all these developmental tapes of everybody from John Cena to Umaga to Jamie Noble to Shannon Moore and Haku, and like all these guys that came in, after WCW, and all these guys that came in on their way up to WWE and through OVW, and all these talents that are in these matches that no one knew existed. And I wanted to present that to the world, because you've seen OVW and you've seen all these other, you've never seen Heartland. I wanted to change that. I was excited about the fact that, like, I'm holding a piece of John Cena's career that nobody's really ever seen unless you were there that day. And that's when I got my hands on the Pillman tapes. And Les told me that we couldn't do anything with the Pillman tapes because the rights rested with the Pillman family. And Melanie Pillman at the time was obviously very estranged from wrestling because of, some ill feelings, both obvious and not so obvious, and her own personal demons. So that was really persona non grata at that point. But timing's everything. About 2 years later, Brian Jr. gets into the business. And Brian Jr., lives near Cincinnati, much like his dad did. And we had some mutual friends because Brian had trained up at Lance Storms, where a few of my friends had, and that kind of got me to meet him and initiate a conversation. Like, Brian, come up to Cleveland. I'm running some events. I'd like you to do an appearance. And I'd like to run an idea by you because I think we could both make some money. And I told him that I had these shows. And, Brian, you talk to your mom. I'll talk to Les. And let's get this done. And the Pillman Show anthology, 20 years, there was never an official release of all the shows. We put it out. We were the first people to ever do that. And between myself, Les, and Brian Jr., most successful thing I've ever released. Because it's something that, if you're my age, you always heard about it. But it's like this mythical thing that never broke out. The only thing that broke out was Benoit versus Regal. People had seen that in a certain few other places because that was, heralded as one of the best matches of the year. But the cards in general, everybody heard what WWF, WCW, ECW under one night, one roof, and the Monday Night Wars are at their peak. What? But we got a chance to show that to them, and that showed me that there's such a passion out there that people my age will still buy DVDs if you give them a reason to. I couldn't sell a Bluey DVD to an 8-year-old. They wouldn't know what the hell it is. But I could sell rare wrestling to somebody that wants to see that and wants something to tangibly hold, and maybe isn't looking on streaming or VOD or anything like that for their favorite 19 whatever match, 1980s, 1970s. So I've been fortunate enough to build a number of relationships, whether it's the Savmar folks that own so many different libraries, or Herb Simmons in St. Louis, or we're working with Harley Race's son with some of the Kansas City content. So much that's out there that's not owned by a billionaire, that if you dig deep, you can find it on a streaming channel, you can find it somewhere, but there's nobody that's taking it directly to them. There's nobody that's really saying, here's where to go download it. Here's where to own the DVD. And here's a sleek package. Here's a collector set. Here's 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of content that you can appreciate. And again, timing. I just happened to solidify these relationships 3 or 4 months before the Von Erich movie comes out. No brainer what our first topic is, right? We do Von Erich Dynasty. We profile the whole family, yes, including Chris, and we put them all out there, and we give people some happy times about the Von Erichs to remember, and that was a huge hit as well. And it spawned the Von Erich sequel with St. Louis footage, and the Harley Race DVD we put out, the Andre the Giant DVD we put out. And if you're new age, it's on digital, it's on VOD, it's streaming. You can watch it that way. But there's still a healthy market for DVD. And with WWE not doing DVDs anymore, they're being phased out of Targets, out of Walmarts, out of Best Buys. Somebody's got to keep it alive. And if it's got to be me to do it, I'm going to make it happen, because I'm not joking with you, and I get anxiety about it sometimes. There's literally a dozen other projects that are up here that me and some of my partners are working on. And I'm not exaggerating. 6 of them we're working on concurrently now. So, not the healthiest thing to do, and maybe not the best thing to do to actually get things done quickly, but we're getting it done. There's so much wrestling history out there that hasn't been touched, and I'm learning more and more as time goes on about how to navigate that and how to make these relationships where every time I get paid, there's a footage owner out there that's getting paid as well, who may not know the best way to monetize or may not have the best resources or the built-in audience. So Pro Wrestling Library is my love letter to the history of this business, that we can show events from the 1950s up until 3 months ago and everywhere in between, and keep the business alive, because even if you're part of a streaming channel that goes away tomorrow, or you're part of any different platform that you're renting the content, you don't physically own anything, I can give you a place to enjoy parts of this business that you haven't seen. But just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they're not important. They're rare, they're hard to come by, but they're so special. And whatever's left out there, we need to preserve, because as I'm sure as any diehard fan knows, back then they would bicycle the tapes to all the television stations and then record over them to save money. There's so much out there that's not preserved, that's lost forever. So whatever's out there, as a historian, as a fan, as a businessman, for every right reason, I want to keep that alive and keep that thriving and keep an opportunity to put that in the hands of the people who are going to appreciate that the most. And that's what Pro Wrestling Library is. Whether you're a fan of present day, stars in independent wrestling, or whether you're a fan of the 1970s, 1980s, 1960s, Pro Wrestling Library, I want every type of fan to go there and find something that they'll enjoy that they didn't even know they wanted to see till they found it.
And that's something I appreciate, honestly. Well, I mean, because I'm pretty much that guy you just described about being a touch older, wanting to hold things in my hand, especially nowadays when you got like video game like PlayStation basically just saying like, oh yeah, you bought this, but no, you didn't really. We could just wipe it whenever we want. Just being able to have this like and have it on demand, but not have to worry about being connected to the internet or connected to like any other wire outside of your DVD player or VHS and your television. Like one of my pride and joys going TMI on this thing and taking up a bit too much time is like 10 discs Wrestling Gold, and for the most part it's just random matches put together. There's a little bit of rhyme or reason in terms of like area, but like it's just so many like old matches of from guys that either you didn't hear of, or like this is before they got big, and like it's
Yeah.
amazing to me.
A
And
lot of those matches, I believe, from the story I've been told, it was Pedro Martinez who had gone around a number of the different territories and bought little bits and pieces of libraries that he could go out and repurpose and repackage and resell, and that's how Kit Parker got their hands on a lot of the missing matches footage, which became Wrestling Gold. And um, a lot of the stuff that's out, not a lot of the stuff, but a number of the stuff that's out there is because of just little deals like that, or like tape trading, or sending your tapes to another territory to advertise the talent coming in. So I have those Wrestling Gold sets, and because of just the natural flow of ownership and relationships, a few of those matches have popped up. At least one that I can think of off the top of my head. One or two have popped up on some of my releases recently, which again, makes my heart feel good, because that's something that I loved 10, 20, 30 years ago. And now I get to share that love with the next generation, or my generation that hasn't found it yet. So just part of the circle of life.
and just a couple of just like more, I'll call it nerd related questions on this. What is your favorite bit that you've able to get your hands on to produce for the Wrestling Library?
Oh God. Ask ask somebody's mom who their favorite kid is.
I mean,
Um,
do my research. I've made like a laundry list of like, man, I don't have this yet. I've gone through chunks of the Wrestling Library and like, oh, I need this, I need this, and now I'm just waiting for payday. But
I mean, I gotta go with the Pillman set, just because to be associated with something that's so historic and stands the test of time, um, and to be able to work with Brian Jr. and a few other people to get, we did a bonus documentary where we did new present day interviews with like Chris Jericho and Christian Cage and Mark Henry and guys like that. We asked Jericho to read. The old Pillman Show program has uh, Bruce Hart's eulogy to Brian that Bruce read at Brian's funeral. Has it printed, and we asked Chris if he could read that as one of the extras on the disc, and he was very kind and courteous to do that for us. So being able to do something like that, um, it really speaks a lot to how important it is to keep these memories alive and keep the thought alive of people who are no longer with us, and we lost tragically young. Um, as a historian, as a fan, as a human, I mean, it really checks all the boxes as far as this is special, and the people responded to it. But beyond that, I'd have to subcategorize it. I always tell people, Montreal Theory if you want to think, Legend of Virgil if you want to laugh, Finding Zach Gowen if you want to feel. Um, it just depends. But I mean, Pillman far away, not just dollars and cents, but in terms of personal sentiment. I think being able to pull that off from a content distribution standpoint is my proudest achievement.
I believe it. Like that was like, I mean, just I'm trying to think of a proper analogy for it, but like I don't want to just use Perfect Storm, but like it was such like a nexus of wrestling history just all thrown together, because you did have all these rivals coming in for one moment and bringing us matches that we never really, like, even if they weren't direct, we didn't get the dream match of Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold or whatever, but like you still had all those guys on the same, not those guys on the same card, and then you have the myth that goes around it because allegedly that was that show was what got Regal a job in WWE, and etc. And so, like, I think that's
And
a
it
great
was the
choice.
only time it was the only time they did that and allowed it to be filmed because they trusted Les that much. They did here in Pittsburgh. They did Curtis Comes Home for Mark Curtis, the referee, Brian Hildebrand, that passed to stomach cancer. Similarly, everybody from all companies, but it was prohibited to be filmed. But Les got it done because that's the kind of respect that Les carries in the industry, up and down. So it truly is a piece of history that I don't think will ever be replicated.
I honestly don't think so either. And to kind of like continue the theme, like what's your white whale? Like what is a mythical piece of footage that you want to get for the library that you don't have yet?
Um, I'll give you two answers because one, I'm not legally allowed to talk about because I have it and I just need to convince the owner of it to let me work my magic and let's put it out. Um, so to be continued there. Um, I would love to find something that no one knows it still exists. I would love to, and what is that these days? Everybody, we found Tom McGee's match with Bret Hart. And I would love to find uh, some collector somewhere that has a stockpile of old tapes they taped right off the TV, or master tapes they stole from the TV station of these years of television that we didn't know existed, or they snuck a 8 millimeter camera into the house show. I guess to narrow it down to one, my favorite territory has always been Memphis. I would love to have the most complete Memphis collection possible, especially because from a rights standpoint, that's the most splintered and convoluted territory. I think you have legal rights to like 3 episodes and you don't even know it. That's how bad it
I
is.
watched it on Amazon and now it's
Yes,
1% mine.
but I would love to be able to find a pure, uninhibited collection that I could be able to say is complete and it's mine, and let's see what we can do with it. But hey, stay tuned because as I think the all the stories I've told in the past hour have proven, I'm too stubborn to quit. I'll keep at it, and whatever the best case scenario is to come out of it, we'll find it. And we're already working on 4 or 5 cool releases coming up for end of 24, beginning of 25. And we're not all old school, by the way. To some of you newer fans, we're planning a little, let's say, a little super kick party
There
for DVD coming pretty soon. So stay tuned.
we go. If nothing else, we got the old wrestling adage, never say never. Who knows
Never.
what will pop up, what we will find, and you know, and with everything being filmed nowadays, because everyone, for those of you who aren't going to watch this video, I'm going to hold up my cell phone. Everybody's got a camera in their hand right now to record something. You know, it'll come out there sooner or later, hopefully. But we've been going for about an hour. There's so much more like we could talk about. Like we didn't even touch about like me. Like this makes me a bad MLW guy for not even touching MLW. But I want to also be respectful for your time because I can just blow another 45 minutes just talking MLW. And heck, we could do other episodes just going back into the video library and just we didn't touch about you do your other jobs within the industry. We didn't talk, barely touch the surface on you booking and doing television, etc. But I don't know, maybe we'll do a volume 2 somewhere down the road.
I feel like it's inevitable now. You just set the stage.
set the standard, set the stage. But we'll go ahead and let you enjoy the rest of your day, get those projects out for the general public. Where can we find you on the internet, and where can we see you in the near future? What do you got going on for us?
Well, ProWrestlingLibrary.com is the VOD website, 500 hours of content and counting. There's a link to the DVD website as well, or if you want to go directly there, it is joe-dombrowski.com. Full-length documentaries, compilations, etc., etc. You can find me on Twitter at Joe_Dombrowski, on Instagram at Joseph_Dombrowski. You can search me on TikTok as well, although how often I update depends on my mood. Facebook, I'm at 5,000 friends, but if you find me there, you can certainly follow me and stay up to speed on everything there as well. And coming up next, I mean, unfortunately, as you know, my flight to Tampa this week won't be happening. MLW's event postponed because of the tragedies and the damage done because of the hurricane, and certainly our thoughts go out to everybody that's been affected and impacted by that. And I hope everybody's able to bounce back on their feet without too much damage. Hopefully, only superficial or property in nature, nothing any health wise. But beyond that, IWC Super Indie Tournaments, October 5th. That'll be live on Triller TV. Super Indie, one of the longest and most prestigious tournaments in all of independent wrestling. I'll be back at Dreamwave Wrestling, suburban Chicago and LaSalle, Illinois on the 12th. And back up to Greektown Wrestling on the 26th, towards the end of the month in Ontario. Channing Decker's doing some great things up there. And it's going to be Lucha Apocalypto in Chicago for MLW. And that's one of the craziest crowds I've experienced, because it truly feels like a genuine Lucha Libre crowd right here in the United States. So I'm excited to get back to Chicago and witness and experience that, and again, feed off of that energy. So, and beyond that, we just put out content-wise, Andre the Giant's Colossal Classics, 2.5 hours of rare Andre matches from the 70s and 80s. At least one of which I don't believe has ever had an official release before. So feel free to look that up if you're a fan of Andre. And every couple months we'll be rolling out another one, maybe even more, depending on how we get things done. But stay tuned and stay posted, because me and a couple of others are digging pretty deeply, and our sample library to compile these from keeps growing every month. So I'm excited for the future.
Well, we'll keep our eyes out on that. I love the Cicero crowd. I was in the front row last Cicero show. So, and that made me wish like I was a little bit up more on Lucha Libre like culture. Like I pay a little bit of attention to Lucha, but like the crowd stuff, I've not studied, and so I'm like some of these some of the chants. I was like, okay, cool. Don't know, but.
Some of them I'm not sure you should repeat.
Probably not.
So yeah, you may have to tread lightly.
I'll just be another guy with a tom. That's what we'll do. Is I'll bring a tom in and just dun 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 and call it good.
As long as you're not blowing any vuvuzelas near me, that can get a little challenging to navigate around sometimes.
Oh, I can't. Honestly, I'm already threatening getting beating by implying I'm going to bring a drum to this, because the wife is not into that much noise. She already has like one earplug just for my clapping alone when we go to shows. So anything louder than that, it's going to be anything louder than that might be a divorce.
If that's you, I don't know if Cicero's your vibe. I'm not really sure.
She had fun, except for the 2 guardrail shots she took when we went. But that is the nature of front row right there, when people are diving into the crowd.
And that is the front row of Lucha, because
yeah,
I would say, what's it been? 80% of the time, somebody's wound up crashing into or on top of my table. They've been wearing a mask, and that's not a coincidence. That's just how wild things get when luchadors get in the moment.
Wow. As veteran indie goers, we should know if the action's coming your way, you move. And, well, we didn't. But anyway, that's we're getting on a diatribe. I said I was going to let you go. But thank you for coming on the show. This has been great. Again, big fan of your work all over the place, and it blows the wrestling library just alone, the concept of it by itself just blows my mind. So I really appreciate you being able to come on.
Beautiful. I appreciate those words, and I guess only thing left to do, one day we will make the sequel better than the original.
There we go. I will plot my course accordingly. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
MLW Confusion is a weekly podcast that's written and performed by Rob Kammer and hosted by Spotify for podcasters. MLW Confusion is part of the Urban Wrestling Network, and you can check them out and check out the Major League Pod on YouTube at Urban Wrestling NW. The background music for this section is Ruined by Day, performed by Alan Schroeder. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to support, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, family, and enemies. Leaving a review is also helpful. Word of mouth of advertisement is very important for small podcasts such as this. Social media links can be found in the description, but Twitter and Instagram are at the Nova of Cass, TheNovaOfCass, and Facebook is at MLW Confusion, all one word. If you'd like to support monetarily and help upgrade my equipment, please check out my virtual chip jar at ko-fi.com/Casanova. Or if you prefer more bang for your buck, you can go to patreon.com/Casanova, CASSONOVA, where for as little as $2, backers get access to the podcast early and without those pesky ads, plus other exclusive content. So join the crew that is headed up by Keith Wynn, Alan Schroeder, Alex McCarthy, and Elenia, and check it out. You can also find t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other merch at the Confusion Podcast on Teespring. Also, be sure to check out the description to find some affiliate links for, well, WWE merch, coffee machines, ice makers, and much more. For business inquiries such as ads and sponsorships, please email rzkammer, that's Kamerer, at comcast.net. Thank you for listening.